Good afternoon. Welcome to the Management Skills and Techniques for Engineers webinar. My name is Jamal Saeed, and I will be with you for the next hour. I want to thank you for taking the time to be with us this Thursday afternoon. This webinar is conducted from Dubai. So for those of you who are in the UAE or outside the UAE, thank you for taking the time to be with us. So just to make sure that we cover some, essential ground or essential rules for this webinar, I'm going to be quizzing you. So there are going to be some questions. I don't think they are difficult, but typically we like to make sure that keep you engaged with the webinar. So I'm going to be asking some questions. So watch out for the questions that they come up. My typical introduction takes you through the objective of the webinar, a bit about the company, about myself. Then we jump right away into the topic of, transitioning from your role of engineer to management, which is a very critical transition, by the way. I would say it is a wonderful transition in your career if this is what you want. But sometimes this transition has its challenges, and probably this is normal because you're moving from what we can say a technical job to a more managerial job and people management and all of these things. So welcome. Let's go ahead and start. Let me do a quick introduction here. I mean, you probably heard of Meirc, and if Meirc Training and Consulting, this is the first time you attend a webinar or you hear about the company, let me do a quick introduction. The company, it is one of the, you can say, early companies in the region. The company is 61 years old and going strong still, which is fantastic. Of course, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic, all businesses are experimenting some sort of a slowdown here and there. But the art of dealing with such crises is, can you adapt? And that's one thing that engineers are very good at. I would say that engineers find solutions to problems in companies. Now, of course, being adaptive is a leadership managerial issue, but engineers always find solutions to problems. So from my perspective, being an engineer myself, I would say that you already have a head start when it comes to how to adapt, because you guys solve solutions. You find solutions. When there's a problem, you find a way around it. So you have the mindset, I would say. The company established in 1958, lots of products and services. As a matter of fact, we have more than 300 topics that we cover, both in English and Arabic. And we also have a sister company, as you can see on the right-hand side of the slide, Plus Training, and we focus on the technical side of things. So I would say we cover a fair amount of your needs and your requirements in terms of the topics we provide and the material we provide. So I hope that you like this webinar, and I hope it opens the door in front of you for your own development. I'm a firm believer that your development is a personal responsibility. Yes, sometimes you might say, but Jamal, my boss told me do this, do that, but never take your development for granted. Always seek personal development. Knowledge acquisition and learning and skills and competencies, the primary responsible person for that is you. And you should always have a passion, especially these days, to develop yourself. And I hope we are on your radar screen. Should you decide to expand on your knowledge, I hope that we can cater to your development needs. I'm not going to be spending too much time on the next few slides. Just this is what we are. This is what we stand for in terms of values, our mission, and our vision and slogan. And by the way, I forgot to mention at the beginning, if you like to have a copy of this slide, on the last slide, I usually share my my email and my LinkedIn account as well. So keep an eye on my email and make sure that you send me an email, and we will make sure to share with you a PDF copy of this presentation. So This is what the Meirc stands for. These are the topics we cover. As you can see, it's a very, very rich portfolio of products on all fronts, technical and management and soft skills. And a bit about myself. Again, I will leave it to your reading pleasure. Should you decide to get a copy of this presentation, you can read more about me, or if you join my network on LinkedIn, I also have pretty much the same details there. But on LinkedIn, the difference is that I do write articles and everything, so you can read some of the articles I contributed to LinkedIn and to the public, of course. And I typically get about 3 or 4 articles a year, but I like to do more of that. So here I am. This is my background, being an electrical engineer and knowing the transition from engineering to management, leadership. So I've had the chance, and I consider myself extremely lucky that I've had to witness and experiment this transition. Sometimes it wasn't as easy, sometimes it was rough, but I would say that I managed to explore many competencies on both sides. Moving on, let's try to talk about what we're going to cover today. There are some objectives I like to cover during these slides, and the main thing is talk about how to apply management functions of planning, organizing, directing in a team environment. And how do we manage project management as engineers, even though you might move away from the engineering mindset, but you cannot run away from a project mindset or project responsibilities. I mean, all of us in one way or another, we're always drawn into projects. So I'll share with you some background on projects, how to use KPIs. KPIs are very important. And one thing in management that I ask you to remember is that, and it's a very famous saying, what you cannot measure, you cannot manage. So as an engineer, we are probably familiar with this, because whenever we do a project, a new product, build a bridge, build a house, build a electronic circuit, do a mechanical thing, we like to measure things. So I think this makes sense to us quite a bit. Of course, how do we communicate is very important, and this is right over here. And then, working in teams and how do we solve problems. So it's going to be kind of a heavy topic today, but nonetheless, I'll try to simplify it as much as possible. Meanwhile, I like to welcome Abdullah, Isamuddin, Plamen, Shahbaz, Taysir. Thank you, Taysir, for being with us today. I also have Nahas, if I'm not mistaken, Nasir Nahas. So welcome on board, guys. So I hope that you get the most out of this webinar. So here we go. Just to let you know that if you decide to take a course with us, we always support our course material with blended learning, so you can continue your learning outside the course if you take it with us. And some of the blended learning is really, really very good, so you're getting the most out of it. So here we go. Now, transitioning from technical expert to a functional manager. This is an interesting transition, and I tell you, it takes some engineers by surprise, and you're going to see in the slides that are coming what I mean. But first of all, there's a question for you. So, and the question is as follows: engineers can never be managers. True or false? So let me do this, and I'm gonna now go into question number 1. So let's see. Try to answer these questions. Engineers can never be managers. True or false? Let's see. Aha. I'm glad you got your get a good grip of how to answer questions here and everything. So, and as I said, this is not to test your knowledge as much as to keep you engaged as well. Oh, very good, very good. I'm going to end the voting in a couple of seconds. I see that many of you are participating, which is fantastic. Thank you. So I'm going to end the voting now, and I'm going to share with you the results. So all of you said false. Well done. This is fantastic. I love it. This is, it's very important to say, to acknowledge the fact that Engineers can be managers and engineers can be leaders. And a big statement is what we see these days, that most of the companies that are excelling are technical companies, software companies, technology companies. And who's heading these companies? Engineers. But when it comes to developing these companies, I hope that I can part today some of the skills that are essential for you if you decide to start your own company one day, and I hope you do so. So I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I'm going to go back to the slides. So well done to all of you. Moving on, remember please that um, uh, people with technical when you move from technical to managerial supervisory positions, sometimes people with technical skills are being asked to assume a management or supervisory job. And both positions require different set of skills. The thing about it is you are capable, you are able to do it. I'm confident that you will excel in that role, but how can you excel even better? So the truth is the knowledge and skills of management make one an excellent leader and manager. Of course, if you know the skills of management, how to manage people, how to manage profits, how to manage operations. So as you can see, I'm moving you away from the solving problems, designing something, to something else. So if you have these skills, of course, you're gonna do better. You're looking at the two sides of the coins, and they have to complement each other. So like engineering, I would say management skills have to be learned. And if you are a good, solid engineer, successful engineer, and you have learned all the technicalities and issues concerning engineering, I'm confident that management, I won't say it's going to be a walk in the park, but should not be that difficult. I mean, if you look at my background, I studied electrical engineering and I moved into my master's in business administration. So of course we have the intelligence to handle both topics. So we need to learn, certain skills, and learning these skills will make it easier for you to make that transition from a pure technical role sometimes to a more managerial role. And I would say that this is very critical. So engineers, in many cases, they are promoted because they show they're very smart. They can solve problems. They can do this and they can do that. But and sometimes this also can cause problems, because the person who is promoting the engineer may not be taking good or may not be paying attention to the management skills. So they throw you in the deep end, that they say. They throw you in the deep end and they tell you go ahead and swim, assuming that if you are a good engineer, then you should be good in everything. And that's a good perception. I must admit that that's very good. That's very exciting. But sometimes the fact that they throw us in the deep end and you have to learn some of the management skills, it becomes a bit of a pressure and a stress point. And that is why this is why I'm doing this webinar, and that's why I run this course, because I know that it is not as easy, but it's definitely a challenge that you can overcome with some dedication and learning and focus on the management skills. So that's why you get promoted, because you are a good engineer. But when it comes to management, we might run into some challenges. So look at this. This is very interesting. Within the first 18 months on the job, 40% of the engineer, they say, you know what, I don't like it. Some of them, they move out. They said, I want to go back to my engineering job. And this main reason behind it, as I mentioned, is that engineers sometimes find it difficult to deal with people, because remember, now you are a team leader, a supervisor, you are a manager, or we may be, they promote you right away to vice president, and then you have to deal with the politics of the place, the people side of things, dealing with goals of the company, doing this and doing that, something that takes you out of your comfort zone. Your comfort zone is, the technical side, and then all of a sudden we're putting you into an area where lots of soft sides, conflict management, doing appraisals and all of these things, and that is why some engineers don't like it. So that statistics is based on lots of surveys, so it's very much true. So how do we overcome it? Well, I hope I can give you some hints over here. So the main purpose as a supervisor and as a manager is to lead your organization into a successful future. Okay, so once you become a manager, please keep that in mind, that once you become a manager, there's a different agenda that you have to work with. The first agenda was designing a product, building a building, doing whatever. But now it's a different formula. This is different dimension where you have to work on the organization itself. You have to prove yourself that you can grow the company, grow your division, bring business, negotiate with suppliers, with other companies. So it's a different story now. And this is why you have to understand that as you become a manager, your agenda will differ now. Okay, so if you want to achieve managerial excellence, okay, you have to avoid some managerial and damaging mistakes. And these damaging mistakes usually happen when you're dealing with people or dealing with upper management and what have you. But I like what this guy says, and his name is John Foster Dulles. The measure of success is not whether you have a tough problem to deal with, but whether it's the same problem you had last year. And I think for us as engineers, we are aware of this one. When we fix something, we don't like to visit it again. So that's a plus for you. Going to a management position, typically you like to find a long-term solution. But if you end up doing a solution that is stopgap and you come and visit it, then let's revisit why this is happening. It might be because the people you're managing don't understand your style, or maybe they are not able enough. And at the end of the day, with people around you, you are also responsible for developing them. So something else to also remember as you move into an engineering position or a management position, there's only one thing more painful than learning from experience, and that's not learning from experience. So, and this is from Archibald MacLeish. He is a very famous American and poet writer. And the thing here is that as you go into this management role, you have to accelerate your learning, and nothing beats experience when it comes to learning. Lots of people say reading a book, great. I mean, you read a book. Lots of people say shadowing a manager, great, fine. You're shadowing a manager and a good manager, but nothing beats it than the experience you put on the job. So yes, as I said, we might be throwing you, or you might be thrown in the deep end, but at the same time, try to enjoy it. Very important that you enjoy this experience, because remember, you're going to have some mistakes here and there. As long as they're manageable mistakes, you will survive. I assure you that. Okay, but the main thing is come with a, with the intention to learn as much as possible. Because if you don't like management, I ask you, maybe staying an engineer is great, but you have to enjoy management. And I tell you one thing, it is enjoyable and it is lots of fun. So we move into the topic of something very important that I like you to keep in mind, that whenever you are dealing from a management perspective, whenever you are dealing with a new environment, please remember this, that the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. This is priorities. As you move into a management job, okay, there will be priorities. While the previous job as an engineer or technical engineer is to deliver a part of a task or deliver a small design or something, here you have to manage different priorities. Different priorities because you could be dealing with different departments. Your boss is asking you to focus on this one and drop the other one. So be very careful, because here you have to keep the main thing the main thing. But in order to do that, this means that you have to watch the productivity, and these productivity, or the productivity is defined in terms of the results and not the activities. So now you are moving from a focus on activity that you used to do to a focus on the results that you have to keep an eye on. And these results come through your effort, but it also comes through the effort of the people that you are managing and working with. So this is very exciting. This means that when you are with this mantra in mind, remember this. This next slide, I love it. Because when you are working as an engineer, remember the well and willingly. Well and willingly means that you have to always look at the ability of the people you're working with, but you also have to motivate them. Now, we as engineers, sometimes motivation does not come something natural, because I'm doing an activity. I'm working with a peer. So, we try to finish and we move on and we move to the next activity. But now you have to motivate people around you. And as you can see, if you focus on the abilities only, okay, without the focus on motivation, then you have to train the people around you. Make sure that you train them. If you are focusing on the motivation, I'm sorry, let me repeat what I said here. If there is no focus on ability and there is no focus on motivation, then either you have to review the recruitment practices here of the person that you are working with, or consider that person a challenge. And does this person need to be trained? This yet maybe we need to give him some ability. Does this person need to be motivated? We need to encourage or maybe discipline. But at the end of the day, your intention is not to keep them in the yellow quadrants or in the red quadrant. You as a manager, your main objective is to move them to the green area. The green area means that you are developing able and motivated employees. So you as an employee, you probably know this very well. At some stage when you join your company, maybe you didn't have the ability. So here comes your manager. You know what? You look like you're highly motivated, but you need some training. And that's what they did. They taught you AutoCAD, they did this, they did that, they gave you small tasks, and then they gave you bigger tasks, but they were training you. And what time you became better at your ability? Sometimes you get demotivated, of course. Maybe something happened at work you didn't like and you feel demotivated. And here comes the manager in terms of motivating you, encouraging you. And this is something you have to always keep in mind, because now you are working with a different set of parameters. But your intention, and please remember this, your intention is, as much as possible, try to bring your people to the green area. Make a great team behind you. And that's what distinguishes you as a manager. The manager who is able to develop people with high ability and high motivation. And if you develop this kind of caliber behind you, they don't take much of your time. Did you notice? Because when you have people who are very able and highly motivated, you don't manage them as much as you manage somebody who is with lesser ability and lesser motivation. And that's why I love this chart. Because if you bring the well and willingly, then people are self-dependent and self-driven, and you can focus on bigger things as well. So that's an important chart. Keep it in mind. Okay, and ask yourself, where am I missing things? Am I missing on the ability side? Am I missing on the motivation side? How do I become a better manager? How do I enable people? How do I motivate people? These are very wonderful questions that you as a manager should explore these days. Now, that being said, there are a few theories about leadership. Now, there are people who tell you that leadership is a trait. What does it mean? It means that you're born with it. Now, this has been in many ways argued, and based on the studies that we have seen in the past 40 years, it seems that this trait theories did not score very well. But you need to be aware of it. And by the way, some people come with some leadership skills. The question here is not do you have it? The question is how do you develop it? And then you have the behavioral theories. Behavioral theories is very nice because you accommodate how people behave when it comes to a leadership perspective. And the last one is one of my favorite theories, is that you apply your leadership skills based on the situation that you're in. So here we go. Are you ready for our journey into theories? Let's do the first one. So when we talk about the trait theories, you know, uh, being an effective leader, according to this theory, that the first person you need to lead is yourself. So you as a leader, you have to lead yourself. So as you can see, moving from an engineer to a manager, you are exploring yourself and your capabilities. So you have to find out what are my weak areas? How can I become a better manager now? And then, of course, you have to demonstrate some discipline and emotional strength. And I like the word emotional strengths because as much as sometimes we as employees drove our managers, through the roof, we made them angry. Now, some of your employees are going to make you angry. So you have to have the emotional strength, how to control your feelings, how to control yourself in front of employees, because sometimes you're going to be facing situations that are emotional. And by the way, the more control over your emotions you have, the better decision maker you are. And then, of course, how to challenge yourself and others, how to stay focused on results. As you can see here, lots of traits. And some people assume that, yeah, people are born with these things, but not necessarily. All of these things can be developed. So when we talk about these things, the leader traits, based on this theory that these leader traits and skills, they affect your behavior, your leadership behavior. So as you can see, we are linking between the traits theory and the behavior theory of leadership. And based on this behavior, you influence the processes and you influence your followers and their attitudes. And accordingly, based on this one, situations vary, and you have to be aware of the situations, because the more aware of the situation you are, the better of a manager and a leader you will be. Eventually, through this cycle of experience, this what I call is the cycle of experience, you start delivering higher performance. So that is why it's very important that you aware of your behavior and that you influence things around you. And I do ask you on this call to be an influencer, be a positive influencer in your life, because successful leaders and managers, they are influencers. They don't use their authority to just drive people around. They influence people and they persuade them and they convince them. And I think that's what we are being required to do more and more today. And then, of course, based on that one, you develop a followership that you impact their attitude and behavior, and eventually the performance becomes better. This will take us to something that, as I said, a theory that I like. And that is something that Robert Blake and Jane Mouton came up with when we talk about the behavioral as well as the situational leadership. And this is based on two dimensions: the concern for production and the concern for people. And nothing can speak better than this grid. So once you have such a leadership in front of you, notice that you have to develop that concern for people and that concern for production. Remember the well and willingly we talked about before? It's pretty much the same thing. So what kind of a manager do you want to be? I definitely don't want to see you here in the 1-1 or in the surrounding area, because that's what we call the impoverished leadership. This means that you don't care about production and you don't care about people. Now, but on the other side, we have to watch out for the extremes, with the exception of one particular one. So let's move into explaining the other four, okay? So the second one that I like to talk about is the concern for production, but you don't have concern for people. Now, some of you are very technical, detail-oriented, and maybe as an engineer, we as engineers, we love details. So we did not develop the people side that much. So notice that you as an engineer, you're very task-oriented, activity-oriented. Let's finish, let's do this. Now, one of the drawbacks of this area right over here, which is we're talking about the task management or the task manager, okay, that people are not motivated and probably sometimes they don't give you the best. So because you're not motivating them, you're not working on their, at the positive, the people side of things. Now, on the other side, if we go into the 1-9, which is the, as we call it, the country club manager or the affiliative manager, somebody who cares a lot about people, okay, that's also, sometimes it's good, but sometimes it's bad because things don't get accomplished here. So on the 9-1, things get accomplished, but people will hate you. On this side, things will not be accomplished, but people will love you. But isn't there something in between? Yes, there is. Now, do you have something here which is called the middle of the road management? Now, that's the kind of, you have to sort of a balance. But remember, middle of the road is the average of the road. So this means that you are delivering average results. And average results does not take us far these days, because many companies are pushing us toward the higher results. And higher results means, do you know how to manage people? And do you know how to manage activities? So if you have a very good balance and you are navigating in this high area between the 9-9, then good for you, because this means that you know how to manage people and production, and this requires special skills. So you already have the technical skills sort of, but you have to also know how to manage the tasks. And then you also have the people skills. This means that you know how to manage people. But so if you are in this area, you are a collaborative manager. You know how to lead people. Does this mean that you have to forget about task management? Not at all. There will be situations, my dear friends, where you have to be assertive, authoritative, maybe ask people to listen, do this. And sometimes there are situations where you have to show some concern for people. This style of management, which we call the team management, takes a bit of time to develop. but it's a very good place to be. And I would say it is an advanced level of leadership. So that's why I like this grid as well. Okay, so you as a manager and you as you grow into more managerial and leadership skills, try to remember these things and try as much as possible to have a balance between the concern for people and concern for production. That will take us to the following slide. Okay, that the Hershey and Blanchard model of leadership identifies different combinations of leadership presumed to work best with different levels of individuals. Oh, so as you can see here, the first slide we were talking more on the behavioral side, but what's situational leadership? And notice how beautiful this is. When we talk about situations, you are talking about the level of maturity of the person you're dealing with. So now let's look at the people side. Remember, in the previous slide, when we were talking about behavioral, we talked about how do you behave toward tasks, how do you behave toward people, and then how do you behave overall in terms of a team. But suppose you have a new person on board. You just hired this engineer or you hired this person. Now that you are a manager, you were given the green light to hire a couple of people for your project. You're developing a piece of software, or you're developing a car or whatever. If this person, as you can see here, has low competence but high commitment, notice what the model tells you. The Hershey-Blanchard model tells you use a directing approach. This means that you be direct with the person. You tell them what to do. However, when some people show some competence, now they have some experience and they are showing some commitment, then you do some coaching. You give and take with the person. If the person is showing high competence, and many of you are highly competent, but variable commitment, then you support them. You talk to them, see what the issues is, you try to resolve it, supporting. And then when you have people who have high competence and high commitment, you delegate. Does this remind you of something? Of course. We talked about it, the well and willingly, but it is inverted somehow. So the well and willingly is right over here. So in your case, you have to move your people from this box to this box, to this box, and to this box based on the maturity of the individuals. As much as possible, try to apply the style based on the individual you're working with, and as they progress in terms of maturity, in terms of competence, in terms of commitment, you change your leadership style and your management style. I love management and I love leadership. And as you can see here, you're talking about supportive behavior, and on the other side, you're talking about directive behavior. And you have to become aware of these things. As an engineer progressing to management position or leadership position, always be aware of these things. So that takes us to our next slide. Situational leadership is not something you do to people, but something you do with people. And please remember this statement, it's very important. Now, so there's no single all-purpose leadership style. And that's something we confirmed. That, it's true that there are some preferred styles over others, but you will basically look at the situation, ask yourself, what does the situation demand? To me, that is the pinnacle of leadership and management skills, that you are able to look at the situation and ask yourself, you know what, this situation requires that I act in a certain way, I lead in a certain way. And that's what the theories are telling us, and that's what practice is telling us, and that's what experience is telling us. And I would like you, and as a favor, look at those who impress you in the market. Look at those who leave an impression on you, and ask yourself, why did this person leave an impression on me? Simply because they dealt with the situation rather than left it to their impulse. If you are an impulsive leader, I tell you, you're going to make lots of mistakes, because at some stage, your leadership style does not meet the situation and you will lose a lot. So it's very important that you read the situation. I like this a lot. Okay. So a leader must analyze the situation and choose the appropriate action. Always ask yourself, is this the right leadership style that I need to apply, or the management style? And by the way, this takes a practice, but with time you become good at it. So don't think that it's difficult. The main thing is, how can I, do this or act in a certain way in a certain situation? It makes a whole difference in your style and in your maturity and how people perceive you. I tell you, it makes a whole difference. So that being said, there's a very famous story of a manager and engineer. And this story, basically, when somebody was flying a balloon, so he asked a person on the ground, he said, hey, wait a second, do you know how to get to a certain location? So the person on the ground, he said, you must be a manager. He said, why do we say this? He said, well, you must be a manager because you say where you're going, but you don't know exactly where you're going. You're trying to find your way around. And then the manager said, well, you must be an engineer because you have so much details. So as you can see, managers and engineers, we know the differences. Managers usually look at the bigger picture, but they don't know sometimes how to get there. And they need the engineers to tell them how to do it exactly. And the engineers need the managers to give them direction, but yet the details are important. So this is something that always remember when you are dealing with people. Sometimes you need the bigger picture as well as you need the details behind the job. Let's talk a little bit about some necessary tools that you need, especially when it comes to planning and organizing. So here we go. Here comes the second question. Are you ready? Planning is one of the key activities of management. True or false? Let me see. And I'm gonna hold on one second. Stay with me. Surveys. So I'm gonna close this one, and I'm gonna choose this one, and I'm gonna give you this one. There you go. All right. Are you ready? Go ahead, please. So planning is one of the key activities of management. All right. True or false? Let's see. Planning is one of the key activities of management. True or false? I'll give you a couple more seconds just to be fair. All right, I see some good answers here. All right, so I'm going to end the voting and I'm going to go ahead and do it now. I'm going to share the results. So some of you said true, some of you said false. Well, planning is a key activity, and in my opinion, if you do planning well, lots of things go right. Lots of things go right. So now I'm gonna stop sharing the results. I'm gonna go back to my slides. So here we go. So let's talk a little bit about some of these things that you have to keep an eye on. So as you know, work can come in different forms, and you are very familiar. If you're an engineer, you know what we're talking about, certain jobs. So they are typically, when you are working on a project, they are, some of them are one-off jobs. One-off jobs, you do the project and get it done. You do a task and you get it done. That's it. But there are certain routine jobs now. Routine jobs means operational, like writing a report to your management. That's a routine job. You have to write the report on the things that you are working on. Could be maintenance jobs. You are maintaining a building or something like that. But when you become a manager, the same thing happens with the routine jobs, like administration, like interviewing employees, like doing appraisals, like going to meetings with management. These are routine jobs. But one-off jobs, management says, you know what, I need you to take on this project. It's a one-off job. You finish the project after 3-4 months, and then they say the project is done, and then they give you another project. So as you can see, work can be divided in these two categories. Something that finishes and we move on, and something that you have to take care of. Something that, as I said, could be administrative or something like that. Now, remember, please, that all major tasks can be treated as standalone projects, believe it or not. And it would be nice if you have this project management mentality as well. I love project management. I consider it as a must for every manager, every engineer. But all major tasks can be treated as standalone projects, which represent in many situations the majority of your tasks. So you as a manager, even though you are joining the management team, okay, I believe that, and based on my humble experience, that project management accompanies you for a long, long period of time. That being said, a project is a specific task or series of tasks which, when completed, will produce a desired result. And I think you all agree with me. Some of you are members of a project or are leading a project, and you know what we're talking about. It's a series of tasks. One impacts the other, one comes before the other, and we have dependencies here and there. And that's why I'm going to explain the task, and you have remember the components of a task, because the task has interesting components. However, the project has to be planned. You have to plan the project. You have to manage it. You have to put the KPIs. You have to put the measures. You have to put all of these things. You have to monitor it. You have to keep an eye on it. How are we doing? Are we spending over the budget, less than the budget? And it has to be reviewed to make sure that we learn from it. So A project has a goal, and like everything else, it has to be planned, managed, monitored, and reviewed. So this will take us to the following slide. The objective of a work order must be, it has to be specific. Make sure that it's not as complex. You would say that the job is complex. That's very true. It is complex, but let people understand it. I mean, if it is too complex to the extent that you sometimes have difficulty understanding it, then you have to divide it. And the reason I say this one is that's why we talk about in project management, WBS, work breakdown structure. That sometimes if a job is very complex, try to break it down to smaller pieces that you can understand it, your people can understand it, and becomes easier to assign and to measure. Because if it's still complicated, you're bound to make some mistakes, errors here and there because people did not get it. But when you break it down to the essential parts, to the essential pieces, and people can understand it and you distribute it accordingly, then it becomes measurable and you can verify it. And you can assign the resources accordingly in a consistent fashion. And I assure you, you can get success in this case. So you can imagine this picture. And this picture in front of you, can you guess who is at fault here? Take a minute here. I just I'd love you to take a minute. Who is at fault here in this picture? The team on the left-hand side or the team on the right-hand side? And what do you think happened? I mean, this is a both. So we have Pleman is telling me both, and both of them are. I love it. Thank you for your participation. That's fantastic. Lack of communication. Of course, Taisir is talking about lack of communication. But I would like you to look at this team on the right-hand side and look, did they manage to get through the tunnel? They managed to get through the tunnel, but something was not communicated, right? So probably the team on the left-hand side did not get were not very good listeners. They got different specs. Maybe the team on the the right-hand side did not communicate things clearly to the right-hand side. Maybe the team on the left-hand side do not have the skills in measuring things properly. They read the specs differently. And over a distance of 10 kilometers, every time you make a 1 millimeter mistake, you eventually don't meet. I also hear from Shahbaz that he's telling me leadership is missing. Probably you're right, Shahbaz. Where's the project manager? So I love it. Thank you so much. This is beautiful. So that being said, that's what happens in projects. That's what's happened in your work. When you become a manager, you have to watch out for these things. So if you were able to highlight lack of communication, I love it. When you were able to highlight lack of planning, I love it even more. When you said leadership is missing, you guys are wonderful, because this means that something happened. So if you were able to highlight these issues, then please avoid them. Elements of management, you have to plan. You have to plan. What are we working on? You have to schedule. Scheduling is so important. And some people mix them together. No. Planning is what we need to do. Schedule when it has to be done. So that's why we split planning and scheduling. Then you have the implementation. That's where you get resources behind the tasks that you have highlighted. And then you have to control things. You have to control them, look at the KPIs, look at the measures that you have to put in place, the specs and everything. And of course, you have to raise reports. You have to write the reports and see how they're doing. And sometimes these reports may require your decision-making capabilities. Typically, these elements are essential elements of management. Each one of them, you require to be very good at it. Now, did you notice that we as engineer, we usually are receiving on the receiving end. We received a scheduled task. We usually execute. They typically tell us this task has to be done in a certain time. And then they say, please report on it. But planning and scheduling is very important. And usually the person who's putting the plan, it is you. When you become a manager, you have to work on the plan or ask your team to participate. So as you can see, these are very much managerial tasks. On top of that, you have to motivate people. So it's exciting. I love it. So now, here we go. That is why sometimes when the task is complex, you have to break it down. And if you are a project manager and you have dealt with project management, you know what I'm talking about. You have to split or divide the task into manageable tasks. And then these manageable tasks, you have to plan them, schedule them, and assign them so that they get implemented. This means the following. When we are planning, okay, good productivity measures can be used in the analysis and development plans. So this means that you have to, how do we plan things? When you're controlling, okay, standards will be needed to monitor the progress. What's the standard? The first standard is time. You have to finish it by such time. Quality, it's another standard, another control standard. Um, a number of tasks you have to do, that's another control standard. Feedback. Now, people get demotivated if you don't give them feedback. So it's very important you tell people how they are performing, how they are doing the job, and so on and so forth. And of course, improvement here. Basically, based on the reporting, you start working on improving things. So these wonderful things, application of standards is very, very important because they can help you in the planning, they can help you in the control, in the feedback, and in the improvement phases. So all maintenance jobs are constrained to some degree. Yes, of course, because remember, even though you are a manager, doesn't mean that you have all the resources. Number of people you hire, it will be limited. Number of skills, sometimes you may not have it. Number of space to work in, especially from a time perspective, may not have all the time. There are certain physical properties. You have to build a house in a certain shape. You have to build a data center in a certain size. Be careful if you are building a data center these days. Be careful that you can put the equipment and pass them through the door. Rules and regulations, government rules and regulations. It's another restriction, another constraint. Budget is another constraint. So as you can see, when you are a pure engineer, you work with these things, but these things sometimes we are not aware of. Your manager is aware of it, but now you're the manager. Now you have to become aware of these things. So welcome to the world of management. As you can see, if you run your budget, that doesn't look very good if you run over your budget, but if you are a good engineer, you try to stay within the budget or negotiate budgets. The same thing with rules and regulations. You meet with government officials or you're updated with rules and regulations. Physical properties, you know exactly what's needed. That's the specs, the space, and all of these things. Are you ready for the next question? So here we go. Here comes the question that I'd like to ask you. Time management skills are critical for engineer transitioning to a management position. True or false? Let me see. Choose how you want to share. So I'm having screen. Here we go. So here we go. Number 3. All right. Time management skills are critical for an engineer. Oh, wow. What a response. Thank you, guys. This is very, very good. So time management skills are critical for an engineer transitioning to a management role. All right. The response is fantastic. I'm going to end the voting now. I'm going to share it, what you've done. So this is very good. So well done. I think that you answered very, very well. I'm going to stop sharing right now, and I'm going to close this window and go back to the presentation. So yes, the answer is definitely yes. And this answer is linked to this element here. This is a task. And as you can see, time management is so important in all the tasks that you take on and you distribute to your team. And the biggest example is, look, whenever you have a task, you have to look at the earliest start of the task. When is the earliest time I can start? When the latest start that I can start with this task? The duration of the task, is it 3 days, 5 days, 1 month? How long is it? When is the earliest finished? How soon can I finish this task? And when is the latest time that I can finish a task? This is one of the basic foundations of project management. And then you have the slack and float. How much time can I play with when it comes to this activity? This means that can I delay it for a day or two before I hit a critical path? So that is why time is essential for you. And not only here, it's almost in everything. As a manager or as an engineer, you need to manage time very well. And this element reflects on you very, very, very closely. So please manage time, be disciplined. And this is what we call discipline here. Be disciplined with your time and make sure that you are very good with it. So resource planning and scheduling, you need to understand what the effort is. You need to understand the working time, the resources required, and the productivity index. So when we talk about effort here, So this means that, how many resources do you need to complete a task? Working time, how long do you need? Especially when you have 8 hours a day. Are you going to work your people overtime? Then you have to pay them extra. And then resources required, to finish within the working hours. And then, of course, the rate at which work will be produced. How much does it take you? And how fast can it take you to finish a particular one? That's what we talk about, effectiveness and efficiency. We talk about efficiency a lot in this area. So that being said, please remember that resource scheduling is very, very important. And at the same time, resource leveling. Sometimes if you in peak performances, you find yourself that you are using lots of resources all at the same time, it becomes an issue. Make sure that as much as possible you level your resources so they are comfortable and they are not under pressure. Resource leveling is tied directly to how much pressure is your team under. Yes, I understand fully. There are certain times when you have to put an extra effort, but don't make it a habit that you're always pushing your team and working under pressure. Otherwise, they run away from you. So performance measurement is essential. And that is why when they do the tasks and everything, you have to measure their performance. And it's simply a method of assessing progress towards stated goals. So if the goal is to finish a building, if the goal is to grow the company, if the goal is to do whatever it is, make sure that you measure the performance here. And it should not be used as a punishment mechanism as much as a communication and management tool. Now, that being said, we like to move to the next slide. It's very important to use to use performance measurement as putting the spotlight on the weaknesses and the strengths so that you can develop your people accordingly. At the end of the day, you're dealing with the dashboard. It's similar to you driving the car or your four-wheel drive or whatever. Performance management is telling you who is working too hard, who's under pressure, who is late in the delivery, and accordingly you should take the necessary measures to manage things and at the same time to fix things, monitor things, control things, remedy things, improve things. And as I mentioned at the beginning, you cannot manage what you don't measure. Now, here comes the fourth question. So understanding the importance of strategic alignment between job objectives and company goals is critical for any engineer who would like to succeed as a manager. Wow, this is a tough one. Let me see if you're gonna get it. I am sure you're gonna get it. I have no doubt about that one. So I'm facing a problem here. How I press this? I hear this one. Okay, here we go. All right. Let's see. Understanding the importance of strategic alignment between job objectives and company goals is critical for any engineer who would like to succeed as a manager. Yeah, that's so true, guys. That's really very, very true. All right. So well done to all of you. I'm going to see how you answered. So here you go. And I'm going to share the results with you. So all of you answered very well. Congratulations. This is fantastic. So I'm going to close. I'm going to now go back to my slides. And so I don't know if you know this guy. His name is Tony Robbins. And one of his famous sayings is setting goals is the first step in turning the invisible into the visible. So when you become a manager, you have to work on setting goals for yourself and for your engineers. And sometimes you might use a participative leadership style where you might work the goals with your engineers, but nothing beats setting goals because goals are positive, goals are good. So you as a manager, now you have to start setting goals in order to manage your department, manage your division, and what have you. Now, typically, setting goals, we know that it's important, but we also recommend that they make them as smart as possible, make them smart, specific, measurable, achievable or aggressive, realistic, and time-bound. Always make sure that they are in writing because this way you have a reference and people can see it, people can read it. Always create an action plan behind it and try to stick with it. That's the discipline, huh? So that is why it is very critical that, whenever you put a goal, please remember that a goal might be more abstract than an objective. A goal might look more abstract. This means that maybe I cannot measure it fully, but an objective has to be measurable. Okay, and it helps in achieving the goal. And This is very important for you to remember. And as I said, this is the formula behind the SMART objectives. And as I mentioned, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound. Always try to make it this way. And typically when you join our courses, we do go through the exercises so that you become very good at developing objectives, because they're essential. They're part of planning as well. So when we talk specific, what exactly are we doing? When we talk measurable, how will you know you are making progress? Because that's the KPI, that's the key performance indicator. Attainable, is it realistic? Can I build the house in a day? Well, is it realistic? And then relevant, does it support the company? Is it important for the company? Is it tied to a strategic initiative? And then by when do you need it? So that is why we call it SMART objectives. And I'm sure that you are very familiar with these things. However, I mentioned the KPI and key performance indicators are important. It's the M in the SMART. So always remember that an indicator is to gauge your measure, to find out what your performance is. And the reason we call it key is make sure that you are measuring the right thing or the important thing. Key means important, because lots of time we measure things that are not that important. Now, with that being said, KPIs help you answer what happened. Why did it happen this way? Is it going to continue like this? What is our action plan? So as you can see, this is very good. And KPIs can be found in so many areas. They can come in financial form, they can come from productivity, people, safety. And we as engineers, we're very familiar with the safety. If you're working in oil and gas, if you are working in airplane industry, if you are whatever it is, safety is becoming very important, especially today in light of the COVID-19. Man, I tell you, you have to be extremely safe. Customer service, miscellaneous quality, whatever. So as you can see, KPIs are all around us, and become familiar with it because they're important for your success. Remember that without a yardstick, there's no measurement. So always make sure that you measure your success. Let's move into dealing with others, team members, contractors, and customers. And here comes the other question. Written communication is the best method of reaching out. Now I'm gonna see if we can get, is this number 4, 5, or let's see? Yes, that's the one. This is the question before last. Written communication is the best method of reaching out. True or false? We have a couple of true. We have a few false. Well, let's see if we nailed this answer. Wow, very interesting. Written communication is the best method of reaching out. So I'm going to end the voting now. I'm going to share it with you. Okay. I'm going to close the question. I'm going to answer the question. So, my dear friends, written communication is important, but I'm going to be very frank with you. It is not the best one. Face-to-face is the best one. Your ability to sit down with people and talk to them and explain things, give and take, have a conversation, that's the key one. Yes, I know sometimes you are bound to only to written for a certain period of time, especially like what we're going through today. Most of the time we're calling each other remotely on Zoom or whatever, but nothing beats face-to-face. So face-to-face is still considered the best, and then there are other ones from communication, talking on the phone or what have you. So it has been said that everyone is a salesman. Remember, you are a salesman. You're selling your objectives, your goal, and everything, but you need to communicate. Communication is foundational for a successful manager and leader. So you have to understand how important it is to communicate and to influence through your communication. With that, communication, if you want to define it, is the passing of a thought or idea from someone to someone else. That someone usually is a sender, and the someone else is the receiver. So can the receiver understand what you're saying? Suppose that you're the manager and you're sending an idea. You're talking about a task, an activity. Did the person receiving it at the other end, understand it? Did they understand what's required? Did they understand that what is needed? You see, that's why communication is critical for management. And so please make sure that you spend time honing that particular skill. When we talk about communication, is what we do to give and get understanding. So did the other person understand you? And that is why it is very important you remember that when you are communicating with people, there's certain perceptions that interfere with your communication. Some of it could be verbal perception, some of it is visual perception. Remember the attitudes and the culture that interfere with things, your education background, your experience, even gender issues pile in. So your message is being impacted by so many items. That is why communication is essential for you as a manager, as a leader. And I know it is important for you as an engineer, but when you become a manager, it manifests itself a lot stronger. And remember, there are several types of communication: the written, the verbal, the non-verbal. All of them are important, but when it comes to real impactful communication, nothing beats the face-to-face. But as we said, whenever you state a goal, make sure the goal is written so the other person knows what they are talking about, okay? So why do people don't communicate well? Well, there are many things. Remember, emotional blocks. And I mentioned this at the beginning, that if you have good control of your communication, you become a better listener. You don't let your biases stand in the way. You become more understanding. You listen better. You become an active listener. Okay? People come from different cultures, of course. You know, on the call, we have people coming in from different cultures, and this is normal in life. As a matter of fact, diversity is something you have to deal with. As a manager, from an engineer to a manager, you have to deal with diversity. And sometimes they are unable to leverage their personality effectively. Some people don't understand themselves very well, and they let their emotions stand in the way. So, what defines a good communicator? What do they look like? What do they sound like? What are they saying? What do they listen to? And that is why, please remember that verbal communication is not over when you finish delivering the message. When you are speaking to somebody, it's not enough that you said it and you left. Seek understanding. Did you understand me? Rephrase the message. See if they understood it. Please repeat what I said. So at least you understand if there is some common understanding between both. And it becomes even more critical when you have a project. When you are working on a big project, it's very important the other person understands the task. So always be aware of the body language. Body language is so powerful because many times the person on the other end is speaking to you through their body language, squinting their eyes, shoulder shrugging or something like that. So body language is very powerful. So always be aware of that one. And there are very nice videos on this body language, and we also teach it in our emotional intelligence courses. And once we have all of these issues, conflicts happen. And conflicts happen because we are humans. We are different. I think differently than you. I come from different background. I come from different culture. But what's interesting is that conflicts in a workplace are important, because notice what happens. If you don't have any conflicts, you have a dysfunctional organization. And if you have too much conflict, you also have a dysfunctional organization. But if you have the right level of conflicts, which is a fair amount of conflicts, which is normal in a workplace, you have a high performing unit. Your performance goes up. Why? Because you're exchanging ideas. You might disagree over something. You become more innovative. So this is very important. Managing conflicts is one of your key responsibilities. And conflicts will happen in your lifetime as a manager, as a leader, between your employees, between your team members. So you have to know how to deal with it. With this, my friends, I want you to remember that Thomas Kilmann is he has a very good assessment. And as you can notice, in his assessment, he talks about assertiveness versus cooperation. And based on that one, 5 styles of conflict management arise. One is about avoiding. Some people avoid conflicts, they don't like it. Some people are accommodating, they give in to people's demands. And some people are competitive, they don't give in, I want to win. Some people compromise, and many of us compromise in our lives. But the one that I really like is collaboration. So Thomas Kilmann, when you do this assessment in our courses, or if you do it on your own, it highlights what style you usually use. But the main thing is that going forward, once you understand what style you are using a lot, now you use it from a strategic perspective. You know that, I have to be careful how I use, how to handle a conflict, and which style should I use. Now, are you ready for the last question? Let's talk a little bit about problem solving and decision making. And here comes the question. You do not need to define a problem, just jump in and start fixing. Oh my goodness, true or false? And this is our last questions over here. Let me see if you guys are still awake. You don't need to define a problem, just jump in and start fixing. All right. Very good, very good. That's great. All right. I'm going to end the voting right now. I'm going to share the results with you. There you go. Somebody jumped in and answered late. My apologies if your reply does not reflect, but the answer is false. So I'm going to close this one. I'm going to go back to my slide. And I want to thank those who answered it is false, because you never jump into a problem before understanding the overall situation. Identify where the problem is. Try to prioritize the problems. Analyze the possible causes. This is beautiful. We have so many ways to analyze a problem, whether root cause analysis and what have you. And then identify the most possible cause and work on it. Put a plan behind it. Fixing problems is part of your job. And you as a manager, people will come to you to solve problems, whether a production problem, productivity problem, assembly problem, whatever it is, a source code problem, whatever it is. You are an engineer right now, and people come to you for a solution in many ways. Yes, technically, with time, maybe your technical skills will become a bit less, but people come to you for advice. You're the manager now. So very important that you have a very nice mechanism. And this is what we call the helicopter view. The helicopter view gives you an overall view of the situation, so you can understand the problems and the root causes, and then arrive at the possible cause and put a plan to fix it. Another approach is the Kapner-Trigo. I highly recommend you read more about it. In our courses, we talk a lot about this approach because I love it. The reason I like the Kapner-Trigo is because it's very executive-like, and it gives you a chance to look at the information, and then the potential problem analysis, the decision analysis, and the potential problem analysis. Means that you analyze the problem, what are the decisions you have to make, and what are the possible risks that I might face if I apply a certain approach. I tell you, when you think of risk, it becomes even better game, and it shows lots of maturity because you are thinking of the consequences. At the same time, here's another tool. We call it the Ishikawa approach because it tackles the causes. It talks about the cause and effect. And as you can see, you put the problem here and you start analyzing the different causes behind the problem. And then you go to the sub causes. This means that you stay under each cause. You might say, okay, if it is the manager, is it the management style? Is it the management approach? Is it this? Is it that? So you drill deeper into this one. This is a wonderful, wonderful style. We use it quite a bit, and engineers are known for that. So that being said, problem solving versus decision making. Remember, they complement each other, but they are not the same. In problem solving, trying to find the root cause, but in decision making, you're choosing an alternative. Both of them reflect on you as a manager, as a leader. Both of them. Both of them will make a name for yourself. How you solve a problem, wow, what a problem solver. But if you don't forget the decision has consequences. Was it the right decision or was it a bad decision? So once you do a good problem solving approach and you highlight the alternative, with decision making, you also can reach the right alternatives. So which way do you go? This is very important to remember, okay? And it's very important that when you're making decisions, okay, you think of the alternatives, but the decision, always think of which one which is the best cost for the behind the decision. What are the risks I'm going to face? If you are not confident of your decision, seek advice. It's okay if you seek advice, okay? Sometimes we don't want to feel like, you know, I'm weak. No, it's okay to seek advice. And as I said over and over again, decision making, because of the consequences, it leaves a great impression about you. And you as an engineer, you're very good at problem solving, and welcome to the world of decision making. Now you have to make some decisions. With this, my dear friends, I like to come to the close of today's session and webinar. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for staying with us. Here are some books and references. This is a very nice book, From Engineer to Manager, Mastering the Transition. The Leadership Challenge. Oh, that's a wonderful book because it tells you how, as a leader, as a manager, you know, it gives you some interesting insight into this world. The 5 Levels of Leadership, you know, by John C. Maxwell. Very interesting writer. Stop Workplace Drama. Oh, how to manage drama and complaints and excuses and what have you. Transforming performance, project management metrics. This is very important. If you are a project manager or you have a PMI certificate, if you don't and you like to have one, please come over to our courses. We love it. But at the same time, if you are a project manager, always keep your certificate up to date. Project management is changing a lot. There's a new edition coming up very soon, so stay on top of it. And then decision making and problem solving. This is by John Adair, very interesting writer. So these are wonderful books. Here we are. I leave you. This is my name, Jamal Saeed. This is my email. This is our website over here. Note down my email. If you like the presentation, I'll be more than happy to send it to you in PDF format. This is my LinkedIn account. Okay. You can look me up with Jamal Saeed and I will show over there, similar to the picture that you probably see on your screen. And these are some dates coming up for our training courses. One of them is coming in October. So if you're interested in attending, please do so. I hope that I'm sure you're going to enjoy it tremendously. And then we also have some courses next year. I hope that 2021 will be a much better year for all of us. And so all the best, guys. Stay safe. And I hope to see you in future courses. And thank you so much for all your effort.
Meirc.com